I remember when I first got my Nintendo Game Boy, the original black and white one, and it came with the game Tetris. And I played that game so much that for a while, anytime I closed my eyes, my brain would fill my vision with falling blocks, and I would think of how I could move them into place to get the lines to clear. And it would take like a couple minutes before I would realize that I'd been sitting somewhere staring into space, playing Tetris in my head. I haven't had very many other experiences like that. Roller Coaster Tycoon actually did it to me for a little while. But Days of Wonder's new game, Five Tribes, designed by Bruno Cathala, has had a sort of similar effect on me. Let me set up the game and show you how it's played, and then I'll explain a little bit more. Now, I've heard some games described as point salad, but if there's such a thing as point salad, then this game is like a point vegetarian restaurant or something like that, with so many different things you can do in order to score points in the game. Perhaps the most basic thing you can do is just to clear off a tile of all its pieces. And the way you're going to do that, every single turn your action is going to consist of picking up the meeples from one of these tiles, making a little pathway of them over to another tile, and when you drop the last guy off, you're going to take everybody of the same color as him off of that tile. Then, if you clear the tile, that's yours. You're going to put a little camo on it, and you're going to get that number of points at the end of the game. The guys that you collect all have different abilities based on what colors they are, and each tile that you end your move on has a different effect that it could give you. These are things ranging from little markets that let you buy goods cards from a row that's laid out, palaces and tree houses, tree places, where you put those buildings on there, increasing the value of those tiles, regardless of whether or not you own them. And the mystical holy places over here, where you can enlist the service of powerful djinns to your cause, but those services come at a price. Now, each of these 5 different colors of meeples has a different kind of ability. They're the 5 tribes mentioned in the game's title. The simplest ones, perhaps, are the red meeples here, the murderers, or assassins. Essentially, the way they work is, let's say that I grab these guys here and go bop, 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 and pull these 3 murderers off the table there. I'm taking an assassin action from this tile. That means up to 3 tiles away, I can pick any one meeple and remove them from the board. Now, that might not seem so great, but, for example, I could choose this guy. And then I have cleared off this tile. It's going to belong to me. If we were in a situation where that was over there, I could count 3 away, and I could get control of 2 tiles on one turn. That's a great way of getting points. So, assassins are definitely one of the combo pieces present in this game. Well, let's look at some of these other guys, too. The blue figures are the builders. The way that they're going to work is they're going to score you points based on all of the building sites that are near them. So, where's a good spot? Let's look at these guys. And 3 squares away, I've got these. So I could go 1, 2, 3, pick that up. I've got 2 builders there. I'm going to get 2 points for every blue tile in this area. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. That's 10 points. That's a decent chunk of change. On the other hand, I've got these 3 other tribes. I've got these yellow guys here. These are the viziers. Let's say I were to go 1, 2, 3, boom, and pick up 3 viziers. Each of these viziers is worth 1 point at the end of the game, but if I have the most, I'm going to get 10 points for every other player who has less than me, so that's a huge bonus. But I'm going to have to fight to keep control of that. On the other hand, the elders, these guys that I picked up earlier, are worth 2 points each, but they can be spent to power the different abilities, the djinns I might collect. And then we've got the merchants here, who are going to let me take cards from the lovely row of wonderful marketable objects that I have. And based on how many of those I collect, I'm going to get a ton of points. Let me show you some of that stuff. So over here on this side of the board, we've got the marketplace. We've got 9 cards laid out in a row, which I'm going to be able to select from. Each card shows a good that it has, and then down here at the bottom is the frequency of that card in the deck. So there's 6 baskets of fish, 4 barrels of spices or dyes or whatever that is, and a depressingly large number of very miserable-looking slaves that I can buy. You know, that seems kind of out of place in a really lighthearted game. That's really all I'm going to say about that. There's a lot of threads on Board Game Geek you can get into if you want to fight about it and tell other people what they should or shouldn't be offended by. But I think if you want to tell other people what they should or shouldn't be offended by, you're kind of a jerk. So let's move on. We've got these cards here, and different actions are going to let you take these cards into your hands in different ways. You've got the marketplaces. The small marketplace is going to let you buy one of the first 3 cards here for $3. Then the larger marketplace is going to let you buy 2 of the first 6 cards for $6. Taking a merchant action, for example, this one, boom, 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 is going to let you take that many cards from the front of the line only. So if I did that on this tile, I would take these first 3 cards, and then I'd be able to buy any one of the next 3 for $3. Your goal here is actually to collect sets of different kinds of goods, which is a little bit unusual. Let me grab this wonderful player aid over here and show you what I mean. So, the final scoring for these is like a giant curve. If you have, 3 or 4 different kinds, you're going to get a couple points for that. But if you get all 9 different kinds of goods, you're going to get 60 points. That's huge. So this is definitely one of the ways that you can clean up. And these slave cards, despite being a little bit tonally inconsistent with the rest of the game, are really useful because they can be used as sort of wild card workers for some of the other actions. They can be used as extra assassins to increase the range of your murder attacks. They can be used as extra builders to increase the strength of your buildings. And they can be used in place of elders to buy or fuel in some kind of sinister way the powers of your djinns, which, let's take a look at those now. Now, over here by the other side of the board, we've got the djinn cards. Now, you can pick up one of these mostly by going to one of the tiles here that has this symbol on it. It's the Buy a Djinn symbol. Come on, light. Focus. There we go. So, for example, grab these guys. 1, 2, no. Other one. 2, 3, boom. Pick up these 2 elders, and I can immediately buy a djinn for either 2 elders or 1 elder and a slave card. But I guess I need at least 1 elder because someone has to be the, I don't know, some reason, flavor. It's really questionable, so don't think too much about what's happening to these people. Anyway, so they go away from you forever, and a really ridiculously powerful magical being comes into your control, I guess. Not only are those worth victory points, as listed up at the top, similarly to the tiles, but they all have abilities. Now, some of those are abilities that can be powered. For example, this. If I discard an elder or a slave, I can place a palm tree anywhere I want. So that guy's pretty cool. He grows trees all over the place. If I discard some number of slave cards, I can pay less when I'm bidding for turn order, which I haven't actually talked about yet, but I will in a second because it's really interesting. So just hang on. And some of them have passive abilities, like this one, for example, makes all of my viziers worth 3 points instead of 1 at the end of the game, which is a huge boost in how much that action is worth to me, even if I'm not taking majority from some other player. Whenever you go to one of those places, you can pay a elder and a slave to buy one of these cards, put it in front of you. This row's actually not going to refill until the end of the round. And that's the same with the goods row. So going first in a lot of these cases is really important. Turn order in this game is often staggeringly important, not just because you're going to get first pick from these rows of cards, but because the moves on the board are going to change kind of a lot after just the first person does their thing. So let's look at the turn order mechanism in this. Alright, so in 5 tribes, each player is going to start the game with 50 actual victory points. Money converts to victory points at a rate of they're the same thing. You start with 50 of them, and your choice every single turn of the game, every turn, is how much do you want to pay to go first? And really going first is the one that's probably going to matter the most. So, the person that has the excruciating benefit of being first in the turn order has to pick, alright, do I want to pay, I could pay 5. But if someone thinks that paying 8 is worthwhile, then I'm going to go second, and I'm not going to be able to take the move that I see right now. In all likelihood, they're just going to stomp some row of people hideously across the board, and everything that I've planned will be worthless, so maybe I should bid 8. but then everyone else could just bid 0, 0, 0, and maybe you've just lost 8 points of lead on them. So maybe you should only bid 5, but then someone could bid 8. This is a really, really excruciating decision a lot of the time, especially because if you're the person who went last turn, you now have the right to bid for 2 consecutive turns, and if you were paying attention, you could have set yourself up for something really awesome, in which case, hopefully the 3 people that now get to bid before you don't notice. This is a really, really tricky mechanism. It's a little less complicated than straight up bidding for turn order. Like, it's not like an auction so much, but it's probably more paralyzing than an actual auction would be, especially in 2 players, where so often you're bidding for the right to take 2 turns in a row with your moves just unhindered by everybody else's constant meddling all over the board. This is painful. And all of that analysis is just for 1 move. After every single turn of the game, everyone's back on this bidding track, looking at the board, looking at what the best thing available in this current board state is, figuring out how much it's worth. If I can take, these 3 elders here, I'll get to buy a Djinn, so I'll trade in 4 points for something that's potentially worth more. I'll have 2 left over, which is going to let me use the guy's ability. How much is that worth? Is it worth 8? Is it worth 5, or should I just wait and see what other things get set up for me? Because if you don't get the first move, you have to wait and see what new things happen on the board after somebody makes their move. Did they set up anything good for you? Did they intentionally try to ruin something, and is there any way to still get it? Every move of the game, you're analyzing this whole board for what the best possible thing you can do is, how much you should pay for it, and how much you should pay maybe next turn to make sure that you don't have to do that again. There's a lot of analysis going on here, and I think I like it, but... Alright, I'm just going to be straight up with you here. You know who the guy in your game group is that you don't want to play this game with. And if you don't know who it is, it's probably you. This game is an AP player's complete nightmare. The board is covered with possibilities at the start of the game. It narrows down a little bit as the game goes on. But there's so many different things you could do from each square, so many different squares. Each of those things is a unique combination of 2 actions, all of which score you a decent number of points. And if you don't get to go first, you have to analyze a huge chunk of the board again. Like, for example, if I go first and I move these 6 guys, I'm going to change what's possible, not only from the squares that I drop these guys on, but if I added a color to any square, like maybe I added this guy, there's a whole bunch of new moves on the board that can end there now. I added this here, now a bunch of moves can end here. I've changed the board state to such a ridiculous degree that whoever was going second basically has to reanalyze the whole thing. And that's going to happen again for the guy that goes third, and it's going to happen again for the guy that goes fourth. It's still not a super long game, but there's a lot of time spent staring at this grid and just going, okay, well I could do that, and it's going to get me those 2, but then that's going to set up somebody to be able to get this tile next, so I don't want to do that. So maybe I could grab, is there any way to get these tiles? There's a 4, there's a 3, there's a I can't, I could get them here. But if I do that, I mean, it's really only 3 points. Is there any way I can get one of these tiles? There's the reds over here. But that's just assassins. That's not that good of an action. But I guess I could go 1, 2, 3, 4 and get the assassins, and then I could take that tile. That's only worth 4 points. What am I supposed to do with this board? And if you're the type of player that likes to build elaborate plans and strategies that span turns into the future, where what you do this turn is going to set up something lovely for the next turn, I think you should probably just forget about that with this game, because even if you do have the ability to set up something wonderful for yourself, it's extremely likely that someone else will swoop in and either ruin it or take it. So you're really forced to make more tactical decisions about what's happening on the board right now and what can I do with the pieces that I've been given. I think that a benefit of that analysis paralysis, though, is what I was talking about earlier. The game shares a lot in common with really, really excellent puzzle games. Things like Tetris, things like Bejeweled, that other one that's the same as Bejeweled, where you're looking at a big grid of things and trying to figure out how to get everything sort of in order for yourself. Now, obviously, this game is a lot thinkier than those games because you're able to take your time with each of those moves, but the type of analysis that you're doing is similar. You've got a bunch of different pieces all over the board, and you're trying to get similar ones together so you can do something useful. The result is that every time that I've played this game, I've gone to bed with images of meeples going around tiles and removing themselves from the board in my head, thinking about how I could have done some of these board states differently. I could have made just a different move. I could have, when I moved that big pile of 6 around the board, if I dropped the blue guy there instead of there, then my opponent wouldn't have been able to do what he did next. It's infectious. So what this boils down to is that Five Tribes is an excellent game as long as you are aware of a couple of things. The first, and the one that I've been harping on for a couple minutes, is that it's not a game for the impatient. If you have analysis paralysis type players in your group, or you have really impatient players in your group that needle you when you're taking a second on your turn, this might not be the game for you. A lot of the time in this game is going to be spent making worried faces at the board, trying to figure out how you're going to make back the $8 you spent to go second on this horrible board state. If that does not sound like something that would be a good use of your time, then just be advised. Five Tribes has a lot of that. The second thing is, you need to be aware of maybe some of the sensitivities of other players when you're playing this game. There are a couple tonal elements and thematic elements in this that are likely to upset people. And if you have those people in your group, or if you are one of those people, you should be aware of that and just try not to be really rude to each other. So, know if there's people that wouldn't want to play this and don't make them do it, or put them in a situation where they would have to deal with you trying to make them do it. So that's a crappy thing, and I don't feel like I need to give you that advice, but it's out there. And then third, I don't know if I like the 2-player game here as much as the 3 or 4-player game. And there's a really simple reason why. So, in the 3 and 4-player games, you're able to occasionally set yourself up to take 2 consecutive moves, like I said earlier. You do have to rely on the other players not wanting to outbid you to go first the next time, and not maybe noticing the really cool thing that you've set yourself up to do, but it's possible, and when you get to do it, it's really neat. In the 2-player game, each player's got 2 turn markers, and you bid for them separately and place them on the turn track, kind of as though you were 2 different players. The result is it's really easy to get to take 2 turns consecutively completely untouchable by the other player. So you get the 3rd and 2nd turns of the round, and your opponent gets the 1st and 4th. Why is that bad? Well, you don't have any risk between those 2 turns. You're taking them consecutively. Your opponent might get 2 consecutive turns. He's got the 4th. He might get the 1st again next time, but he can't be sure. So, he can be sure if he bids 18, I guess. But he can't really be sure. So, you've got a really powerful move there. And what's more, it's really hard to break out of that cycle once you're in it, that A, B, B, A type of cycle, because your opponent gets the first bid, and then you get 2 consecutive bids. So you can either bid 2 lower than him or 2 greater than him, and still have 2 consecutive turns, which is probably worth what you paid. So, that's a little weird to me, and I'm not sure if I dig it. I still like the game as 2-player, and I don't think I would turn it down, but that's definitely something I've noticed in my plays of it, and it's a little bit frustrating. Finally, I'm not sure why this game didn't come with a solo game packed in. I don't really play solo games, but this game seems like it would lend itself to that extremely well. You've got a big board, you're making these different moves on it, and you want your moves to play off of each other. I think it would play really well solo, even with just the simple variant of play until you can't anymore, see what your score is, try to beat your next high score, but I think there's probably something a little more elaborate that could be done to make it super interesting, and I imagine somebody on the Board Game Geek forums has come up with that by now actually already. But given that it's such like a puzzle of a game, I think a solo variant would have been really not too hard to include and would have satisfied a big chunk of people that I'm not usually part of, but I could see the appeal here. So that's Five Tribes, and that's pretty much everything I can think of to say that I don't like about Five Tribes. So, yeah, it's a game I would definitely recommend. I would go out, give it a play, and hopefully you will still be able to sleep after it. Me, every time I close my eyes, I'm thinking about whether I should have taken the 12 points from the builders or the 4 cards from the merchants. So, thanks Days of Wonder for giving me horrible insomnia. Bye-bye.